If anybody has any ideas on how to get these videos seen by more people, please let me know in the comments. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep doing this for 100 views. But I wanted to cover something having to do with triads again today. And if you watched the video on the superimposed triads, I was a little concerned that it may have just sounded like it was relevant in theory textbooks and not in the real world, and it's not the case at all. Case in point, the Beatles, the White Album, 1968. Everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkey. There's a lot of mini lessons in simply breaking down the parts of great records. You've got this triad on the offbeats, and it's just an E major triad up here at the 9th fret on the 4th, 2nd, and 3rd strings. And you can get that entirely with your index finger, just barring across all 3 strings. Then the next triad voicing is an A in first inversion. That's the 11th fret on the 4th string, still at the 9th fret on the 3rd string, 10th fret on the 2nd string. And then after that, it goes up to a higher inversion of the A triad. 3rd, 2nd, and 1st strings, 9th fret, 10th fret, 9th fret. That's the easiest way to do it. But if you want a thicker tone, of course, you could choose to play it on strings 4, 3, 2, and play it up here at the 14th fret. But economy of motion, of course, would be to stay in the same area of the fingerboard. If you just play those triads isolated by itself, it sounds like a chord change from E to A. But of course it's not E to A, it's all over E. And you hear that when it gets mixed into the track. If you were to have over an E bass, an A triad, that's 4 over 1, and it gives you the 6, the 1, the root, and the 4. So it suspends the harmony. Very common to do that. Keith Richards made an entire career out of it. Of course, this is all open G stuff, and I didn't want to retune the Strat. Joni Mitchell made a career out of it. Paul Simon, I Am a Rock. A winter's day in a deep and dark December. I am shielded in the armor of my vintage tone. I have my guitars and my amplifiers to protect me. Like if you didn't superimpose it, you'd have AC/DC. Very different sound than the point is, it's everywhere in classic rock. So, getting back to the Beatles. How many guitar lessons do you want from those records? You could extract the lesson of the simplicity of triads for a simple rhythm guitar part. Then notice that the groove of it, it's on the offbeat. So it's not on beat 1, 2, 3, or 4, it's in between. And once Paul and John are in, if you listen carefully, occasionally it's only the end of 1 and the end of 2. And he won't play anything on the end of 3. So already we've got a lesson in the simplicity of triads, rhythm and groove, economy of motion, as in where are you going to play it on the fingerboard. And then when you put it together with everything else that Paul's playing and John is playing, we can hear that it's basically just E blues, E dominant 7. And that A major triad, if only for a brief moment in time, because it's pretty staccato, it's pretty short, it's not sustained out, but that's a superimposed triad. So that's giving the root, the suspended fourth, and the sixth over the one. So here is just the triad part through the intro and the first verse. Then when you add the next guitar part in, it's loosely something like this. I didn't exactly copy it note for note, but it's the basic idea. Then you've got Paul McCartney, who, aside from sharing a birthday with 40 years apart and being one of my all-time favorite musicians ever, certainly of the 20th century, is also one of my favorite bass players of the entire classic rock era. You put it all together and you've got a situation where the harmony is clearly E blues, E dominant 7. So this is not E to A. It's just a superimposed 4 chord over the 1. I would recommend getting familiar with 1 to 4 in every single key, the same way that I recommended getting familiar with the 6 minor down to the 5 minor over a blues in every single key. I would recommend working on it through the circle of fifths, not because George Harrison or Keith Richards or Jimi Hendrix or Eric Clapton or Jeff Beck used the circle of fifths to practice, but because unless you're a naturally creative person with an aptitude for playing the guitar, you're going to have to work at it. Other people told me that they thought that I was somewhat of a child prodigy, but guess what? I wasn't really. I just wanted it more than everybody else, so I worked harder at it than everybody else. That was the only difference. I would also work on it in a pretty earthy way. I would go ahead and I would just listen to records, and I would pay attention to what I was listening to. You can practice as you listen. It requires a different kind of listening. So listen really intently, and when you hear it, take notice of it. If you have any question of whether you're hearing the thing you think you're hearing or not, pick up the guitar and see. You might be listening to a track and go, that sounds like superimposed 4 over 1. Could it be? Pick up your guitar. Try that 4 over 1 that you've been practicing by then because you've been taking this seriously and familiarizing yourself with those locations on the guitar. Then you find out, sure enough, when I put my fingers there, it sounds exactly like the record. I was right. It's 4 over 1. The bad news is you're never going to get there if you're relying on getting tabs for everything and dialing up YouTube videos and watching somebody else show you note by note how to play everything else. You'll never develop your ear. You have to do it through a combination of personal work on the guitar, and nobody else will do it for you, and listening. And you have to listen the right way. And then the records become your guitar lesson. Extra credit if you made it this far. Flat 7 over 1 is also a very usable sound in the realm of blues and rock guitar playing. I would say if you work on 4 over 1, flat 7 over 1, 6 minor down to 5 minor over 1, which is more a blues and jazz application, but it's not giant steps. The practical stuff that's applicable for music that far more people like and there's a far greater audience for, those applications can be 4 over 1, flat 7 over 1, 6 minor down to 5 minor over 1. That'll get you started. The other stuff I'm not going to waste your time with if you're not interested in jazz. To give you the sound of 4 over 1, if you took an A chord, wouldn't the flat 7 be G major? Under an A bass. And you might notice that leads very nicely to a 4 over 1. That would be a D major triad with an A bass. And that resolves nicely to the A chord. Want proof? Bruce Springsteen. I think it was the intro of It's Hard to Be a Saint in the City. And you can argue that that's not truly flat 7 over 1, but guess what it is? And a music theory snob can say you're missing the point, but a music theory snob is stuck in the halls of academia and not out in the real world. Realistically, if this is G major, and you just add 2 frets up, so it's now like G major with an E on top, well, that's like G6. If you put it under an A bass, well, it's kind of like A9. I can play your games. I know your language. I also know that that language, unless it's translated into the real world, will do nobody any good. You hear John Fogerty doing the same thing on the intro to Fortunate Son, Creedence Clearwater Revival. Something that tends to work really well is if you start out doing that over the root. You might also call that an A pedal. Somebody might call it that in another theory classroom. But it's just the sound of flat 7 over 1. And then when you go into a verse, like on Fortunate Son, then the chords actually shift. So then it becomes 1, like as in A, down to G, as in a full flat 7, then to 4, as in a full D chord, back to 1. So the chord progression is 1, flat 7, 4, 1. At that point, it really doesn't matter what key it's in. It could be in any key if you familiarized yourself with that stuff through all the keys, and at least the guitar keys if you're dead set on being more of a rock and roller. If you go, I don't have time for this, I want to be the next John Fogerty, fine, stick to the guitar keys. Encapsulated and caged, C-A-G-E-D, and then make sure you have a good capo. But you'll be more of a complete musician if you go ahead and you actually learn it through all keys, because in other kinds of music and other kinds of application, you might want to play in B flat and not be capoed. How do you think session players write out charts so quickly on the fly? You got to have a good ear and be familiar with all these sounds and what these sounds are. Then you can just hear it and write out 1, flat 7, 4, 1 over 4, flat 3, and so on and so forth. So I can show you all the reference points anybody would want. I can show you exactly how it works and why it works. But the one thing I can't do is I can't do it for you. And I can't make anybody take it seriously. And evidently I can't make the algorithm work. So I legitimately started this channel with a pure vision in mind that I wanted it to help people. I wanted it to reach people. And I wanted it to be an alcove. I'm interested in whoever has seen this video and enjoyed it. I want you to get better. So just listen for those things, take stock of them, and work with them wherever you're at on the guitar. I think one of the biggest problems is that we wait to get too good. You don't have to wait to get any good. How much did Keith Richards do with so little? Was George a virtuoso on his instrument? No, but George Harrison to me is everything you would ever want to be as a guitar player in a band. Was Stevie Ray Vaughan a jack of all trades? No, he was a total master and virtuoso of one. As much as we can say about versatility, and as much as I would advise any young musician to become as versatile as you possibly can, you've got to find your own path with the guitar, and you'll never find that path as long as somebody is spoon-feeding you everything, and there's this perception that it's supposed to come easy. It never comes easy, but it's always worth it in the end. I'll see you again before long, and maybe right now I might just play something out for you just to play.